Good evening. Welcome to the community friends. Welcome. This is produced by the Norwich Bully Busters. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying. We're at first part of May, and a lot of things happening here in Norwich in May, especially with the Bully Busters. We're celebrating our annual dinner. Will be this coming Thursday, our 9th annual Bully Buster dinner, which will be at United Congregational Church, which will be honoring some local community members that have supported the Bully Busters. But more excitingly is Friday is our 9th annual World Youth Day. You got to come down. It's right downtown, right across from City Hall, 87 Broadway, from 5 to 9 p.m. You're going to see a wide variety of performers and entertainment from the youth, and it's about celebrating our youth and our diversity. And it's going to be an exciting day. We have a wide variety of performers from NFA, Norwich Tech, all the local schools. Please come down, support the youth, see what they can do if they're given a chance. Also that night, we are having the March of the Upstanders. And the idea behind that is to get our community members and youth and just everybody in town to speak up against bullying. We're going to have the march. It starts at 5:30 right out in front of City Hall, and it's just to encourage everybody speaking up against bullying and becoming an upstander, saying enough's enough, and we can speak up and we can end it. Come join us, be part of the movement. We've got quite a few kids coming out to just say we want to speak up, we want to become upstanders, and it's okay. That's going to be Friday at 5:30. Right after, I know Norwich Youth and Family Services is doing a Youth Service Day. May, like I said, May is going to be a powerful month here in Norwich. First part of it's all dedicated towards our youth. I know they're doing a Youth Service Awards Day through Norwich Youth and Family Services. They're honoring a lot of local youth that have just been outstanding in the community, so come down and check that out at City Hall, and which is a great place to focus on our youth, is right across from City Hall. So I hope we see you guys down there first Friday in May, our 9th annual World Youth Day. You just don't want to miss it. And we got, like I said, just check out the community calendar in Norwich. There's a lot going on. The Norwich Sunrise Rotary is having their annual their duck race, the great duck race, the Norwich Sunrise Rotary, and this benefits a lot of local charities. It's going to be May 12th from 12 to 5 p.m. down at the Fireman's Field in Yantic River. The Yantic River Fire Department is also having a chicken barbecue that day, so that's going to be a fun family event. The Bully Busters will be down there with their table promoting their activities. Like I said, that's May 12th from 12 to 5 p.m. They're going to have, it's going to be something unique. They started last year with the ducks, 3,000 rubber ducks going down the river. So it'll be quite unique. It's a family day. So check that out, May 12th, 12 to 5 p.m. at the Fireman's Field, the Norwich Sunrise Rotary Great Duck Race, which is kind of cool. So with that, we're celebrating Norwich. We welcome back Karen Neeley from Celebrating Norwich. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing, Deb?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
And this month we just, Karen's been coming on every month just to talk about the Celebrating Norwich and what we got to offer here. I just talked to you about all the different stuff we're doing around youth, and Karen's going to talk a little bit about what's the Celebrating Norwich's history.
Well, yeah, and what we've been doing, if people have been following these shows, is that we've been talking in general about things that we are proud of in Norwich and all that goes on and why it's good to live and work here. And then there's different aspects of Norwich that we're going to try to focus in on. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're going to focus in, as you said, is celebrating Norwich's history. And we brought on Bob Mills, who's the Executive Director of Norwich Community Development Corporation. Welcome, Bob.
Good evening.
Mm-hmm. And Bob's going to talk to you and I about the Uncas Leap project.
Yeah. Which me and my co-host, who's on the camera today, we love the Indian Leap, so we're interested to hear what's happening down there. So.
Well, great.
So what is the Uncas Leap project?
Well, going back for the better part of a year now, the city actually acquired an acre parcel on the, I guess it would be on the east side of the falls, through a tax foreclosure. So the prior owner had been trying to get some development going there, and just due to mainly the economy, and it just didn't work. And so through default on taxes, the city acquired the property. And then actually Bill Champagne from the city's historical society found out about a potential grant that could be had to come up with more of a program. Now he and Melissa Olson and some others have been working on trying to get something to go on that site for I think 3 years.
Sure.
And so the grant, we applied for the grant and we were awarded. It's from the Connecticut Commission on Culture and Tourism and matched by the Sachem Fund. And that grant for $35,000 in total funded a sort of a study to figure out what could be done on the site. So we'd gone through a few things to figure out passive uses, residential uses, commercial uses, and what might make some sense. And it was fairly inconclusive, but it really basically showed that a passive use had a very low cost, and any return would be sort of distributed amongst the community. A higher level of development, either residential or commercial, would be a much higher cost, and the benefit would be derived much more to whoever the developer was. So we kind of thought about it, and we thought, well, perhaps the right thing to do would be to try to come up with a passive use that celebrated the history of the Mohegan tribe and in the events that happened there in their legacy, as well as some of the when the settlers came and how they made use of the site, you know, for hydropower and for industrial uses. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of the ground zero, if you will, for a real mixing point of the two different cultures. So we've been working on trying to figure out, you know, now what? Now what do we do there? And that's really the basis of this study.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, you know, from a small city standpoint, I mean, it's you know, visually it's a most beautiful site.
Oh, sure.
You know, the natural geography and the way the falls have carved things out over time. Mm-hmm. And then historically, you know, I grew up in Norwich, so I remember, you know, as a child in grammar school when they took you over there and they tried to explain to you, you know, what happened at Uncas Leap, you know, what happened at Indian Leap.
And what did happen there?
Well, you talk to the, right, if you talk to the tribe, I guess the stories vary. From what I understand, their history varies.
And there's a good logic for that, too, and that is that their culture is one of a verbal legacy. So they tell stories, and they hand the stories down from generation to generation. And you can imagine two people hearing one story. It gets changed slightly over time. And so now there's a few basic iterations of what transpired at the site. But fundamentally what had happened was the Narragansetts and the Mohegans were warring down south, probably closer to where Three Rivers campus is. And during the course of a series of events, the Mohegans ended up leading the Narragansetts to this site. And then the stories begin to vary at that point. Some stories have it that the Mohegans actually surrounded them and caused the Narragansetts to leap to their death. And then the other stories are much more fantasy, I suppose is the right word, in that Chief Uncas had leapt across the falls to the safety of the other side, trying to escape from the Narragansetts. So the choice is yours as to which one appeals to you.
And that they leapt and they didn't make it trying to follow him over. So, you know, but really that's why it is called Indian Leap, because some Indians leapt, we just don't know how.
Which way.
And, you know, we don't know how or why. But it is pretty interesting to think that also the tribe whose history is so rich is still here and so influential in our community. Right. And I think that speaks to the committee that's been working on it and the collaborative effort that I've seen NCDC develop, correct?
Really this is sort of a theme that we've had in NCDC for the last couple of years, and that is that this is owned by the whole community at large, and so we're trying to get engagement from all levels of the community. So we have on the steering committee to try to figure out what to do and how to do it. We've hired a consultant, and that's what we're spending the money on, but the steering committee is made up of citizens. It's made up of the Historical Society, of the leadership of the city, from City Council, from people from the utility division of the city. And you know, we're trying to work together to figure out, excuse me, a responsible approach for how to really leverage this site and activity for the benefit of the whole community, rather than just a particular single interest.
Which is cool, because we don't want to be like kind of like what happened with the Masonic Temple that was built years ago on, you know, burial ground. And so you're doing stuff proactive and make sure we're not doing something that may offend.
Right, and the tribe is a critical part of this project and work, and they've done a great job of trying to educate the steering committee as to the ins and outs of the history and the legacy.
Okay.
And a great deal of the discussion has been focused on the burial grounds and the royal burial grounds. You know, it's their highest, it's where their chiefs and stuff were. And
from what I understand from some documents you shared with me, their grounds are weaved their way through our town, kind of, sort of. They're not just, you know, where Masonic Temple was, right? I mean, there's a portion there, but it's a larger area, if I'm reading the maps right. So, I mean, you know, this is something, like you said, we have to be very mindful and respectful. Yeah,
and it's nice that, you know, to see that we are this time around proactive. And in regards to the city, once they found out that's what was, we took the building down and gave it back to them, basically. Right. So, which is for folks to see.
Yeah.
It is, and it's a nice, I mean, there's not very many, this is going to branch out into several different discussions, but when you start talking to people about how to brand a community or how to try to bring investment and the economy to a community, you have to sort of figure out what differentiates your community from the next one down the road or the one across the state. And just at the sort of highest level, people were always saying, well, our community is halfway between Boston and New York. And we say, yeah, along with, you know, 2,000 other communities, you know, so that's not a differentiator. We have a downtown. Well, a lot of communities do. We have a downtown on the waterfront. Well, there's still some that do, you know. There are not, as far as I know, any communities in the world that can claim fame like Uncas Leap or Indian Leap. We're so unique in this regard.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we're trying to figure out is how to, the term we've come used to using now is how do we monetize the Uncas Leap site for the betterment of the community? And I think it might show up, it's not done yet, but I think it might show up in this sort of, this is what sets us apart. And you can use the theatrical movie rendition of it where that's the last of the Mohegans. You can use the more politically correct, you know, this is sort of what the Mohegans believe happened on the site and the significance to their culture. But either way, no matter how you spin it, it is unique. It doesn't exist in any other community.
Yeah. Well, plus, I mean, what we have to remember too is that, and I'm starting to learn this the more that I do work within the city and I work with NCDC and I talk to other people, is that, you know, we tend to sort of think of these one project type things that exist in and of themselves when you know, Indian Leap or Uncas Leap is not, you know, just a project in and of itself. It's tied to other things, and it's tied to the Heritage Trail. And the Heritage Trail is tied to the downtown. The Heritage Trail is tied around the downtown. It's tied to the water. So we have to start thinking in terms of, you know, when you develop something like this, you don't just develop it. What do we develop that goes with it in order to create the larger success, right?
It kind of makes sense because that's where our history is. It's everywhere in Norwich. So it kind of ties and expands to all these things.
Well, you kind of do have to start looking at it as, if you're going to focus on this, then what other historical things we're going to do? What other features of Norwich are we going to enhance to sort of, you know, I sort of see it sort of growing out like a brown garden that you plant something in, and then sort of the vines sort of start reaching out, you know, and we're going to start greening up the whole city, tying it all together, right?
And it goes back to when we had Jason on the show the last time. He talked about that, how planning is such a key piece on that. You know, you don't think, like he brought back to the Brown Park, that was a parking lot at one point, but someone had to plan that, and it takes some time and the foresight and thinking out how these all fit together and stuff. And now look what we got down there, you know. So.
And I think that's exactly correct. That we're trying to say, well, and actually, one of the conscious decisions was: do we do this as a gated enterprise? Do we try to charge admission to get to this thing? Is that a way to monetize it? So you could put a gate up and you say, okay, it's $10 to come and see the falls, or it's, you know, you could do something like that. But then you're sort of in competition with every other historical asset that the community has. Instead of becoming a part of it and helping them be successful and helping the whole community, you're sort of saying, well, it's more important that I'm successful on this site. So We made a very conscious decision to say, no, it shouldn't be a gated thing. It shouldn't be a private residential community. It shouldn't be any of those things. We have to, in the conundrum, and where we are really right now, is to try to figure out how do we leverage the historical assets across the community and across the region for the betterment of all of us by using this site in a way that it hasn't been used before. And a visual that I like to use is if you were to have a visitors function where you had a location where people could come and enjoy the sights, the scenery, the history lessons that are to be learned, how would you service those folks? And it's typically done in other communities with, if you go to really historical communities, there is a gate that you have to pay, but it's across a whole number of sites and assets. So there might be a way to look at that. There's a feature in Charleston, South Carolina. You can go and you can take the carriage rides. So 8 or 10 or 12 people can get on a carriage, and the horses will kind of go down the streets, and the driver will tell stories about here's what happened here, and here's the significance of this building and this road and the cobblestones and so on and so forth. And then you can take a graveyard tour at night or whatever. We don't have the central clearinghouse for those things. We don't have a place where people can go who are interested in a whole myriad of things and spending 4 hours. We don't have a place for somebody to go to buy a ticket.
Sure.
We don't have a carriage ride available. We don't have those things. And I think that's what we're trying to see, how we can turn Uncas Leap into something that's unique and creative in and of itself that might be a higher value than general perception, higher value across a wider array of public than any one of the other historical assets. But use this one to drive the economy into the other items across the city. And I mean, there's a number of things in the city that are just remarkable, but they're really, for the most part, remain hidden treasures.
True.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to tie them all together. There's no way to get people to those things. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. 2 cities I visited, and this wasn't. I went to Williamsburg. Williamsburg is a whole different type of experience, because it's its own town. I mean, they make a town, and people and costumes and everything. But even the simple thing, it sounds ridiculous, like when they do the duck boats in Boston or in Baltimore, they drive you first through the town, and they point out all of these, here's a church where this happened, here's this, but then they take you out on the water, and they continue to point out, I remember in Baltimore where they were pointing out, this is the point at which, during a war they came up the bay, and I mean, but it's like, it's a fun way, and you remember, but they find a way to showcase showcase the whole community, and you pay a fee, and they take you all over, and you get to see the whole town.
Yeah.
So
it could be similar to like how the state parks. The state does the one in the state parks. You get these passes and stuff, and you're gonna pay, but you get passes for the year or something. But
or like a park hopper pass.
Yeah.
Like they do down at the amusement parks in Florida. You buy one pass, and you can go to this park and to that park for 4 days or whatever. So you'd buy it, and you'd get to see a myriad of things.
The challenge is, it's so much easier to do things by yourself. I mean, you talked a little bit about in your own, insular way. It's so easy to do things by yourself, but it's not very effective.
No.
It's easy, but you trade off effectiveness. To be very effective, you'd have to do a big group thing.
You have to collaborate.
But it's not very easy. So you have all these constant trade-offs that you're trying to do. How many people do we include in this one activity, and how many visits around different sites do you try to include to get this thing rolling? I think the answer is just enough to get it rolling, and then you begin to build in more as you go.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah, because I think that's one of the things that I've seen repeatedly in some of the things, and not to criticize Norwich, because we're always celebrating what happens, but I think sometimes what happens is, and I can relate this to myself, if I can't do it this way, sometimes you don't want to start it. So it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, we can't imagine how it would go. And you're very good at, because I've worked with Bob on some things now, he's very good at saying, well, we can adjust as we go along. And I think that has to sort of become the mantra, that we can do this, we can start it, and we can add things in. But let's get it to a manageable point. Let's get it to a good point where it's a project worth starting, and then we can add stuff in later.
And for those folks that are watching, I'm not sure which piece of property are you talking about by ideally that the city just bought?
Yeah, in its most recent iteration, it was known as the Art Form building.
Okay, the building that's basically, okay.
It's collapsing and falling down, and then there's an immediately adjacent to it and directly behind it is a very large or larger stone building. So the Art Form building is a red brick building that's collapsing, and behind it is a much older, and I think, if I've heard it correctly, it may be the oldest standing industrial building in the city.
Wow,
directly behind it. And that building seems to be salvageable in some regard, but the brick building to the front is less so. So this is on Yantic Street.
This is the lower falls.
The lower falls off of Yantic.
Not the upper.
Yeah,
Okay.
good point.
All right, yeah, because there is the lower and the upper. And you know, it's amazing to me, I know some people who have never been there.
Yeah.
Well, it's not easy to find.
I know.
And then when they come down, they're like, wow. And because me and the co-host, we do a lot of ventures on Saturday, and we started taking pictures, and we supposed, well, where are those falls? And when we said it's right here in Norwich, they're like, oh, wow. You know, they were surprised, you know, and then don't know the history of it either, like you're saying, when you're down there.
Well, actually, there is a former, a city council from, I don't know how many years ago, but I can visualize the names. There's one of those blue historical signs
yes,
right
there is.
there
Yep.
at the gated portion of it, or where the fence is, and it's got a basic history of what happened there. So you do get some sense for what happened there. But I mean, it's just a beautiful, and I've talked about this before. It's just an aside, but you can actually walk across the bridge on the lower falls, the concrete bridge, and you can go up and around and over a trestle, and you can end up over on Asylum Street near the dog park.
Yeah,
so
my
it's
friends,
like,
my friends have tried that since you told them
the
that.
walk that I took. Yeah, I took the walk all the way around and down around there, and I mean, it's just part of the walking piece of Norwich. So if you're walking, you can.
Right.
There's a walking piece.
So
to that
they're
as
telling
well.
me we got a little less than 10 minutes, so.
So the I guess I had wanted to talk about sort of the historical tie into economic development. You know, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but
Right.
you know, I guess people, you know, I hear people in Norwich say, well, we should just focus on our history, or we should just do this, or, you know, and it's not just a case of let's flip the switch or let's focus on history box today, right? I
Right.
mean, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, my space in Norwich is economic development.
Sure.
I try to stay clear of all the other activities, and there are many, and many worthwhile activities.
So how does this fit into economic development for those folks out there that
Well,
listen?
I've been doing the real estate-oriented development work in the city now for 3 years, and I've constantly run across the fact that a great deal of the reason that, especially in the downtown and in the villages, there's such a dearth of activity and vibrancy is that the markets are not there. And so a private enterprise, a landlord or an investor in a property is very limited in what they can or will do with a property until the market comes. In the American way, you know, economics 101 is supply and demand. As soon as the demand is there, the supply will rise to the challenge. Our supply is already, for the most part, built environment, buildings that are sitting there vacant or mostly vacant or very underutilized, collecting very low rents, for example. And so what the landlords have been telling me for 3 years is, you got to help us get a market. We need more of a market so that we'll have more opportunities to rent our properties. We'll come forward with our money to invest in the properties, but not until we see a market. So this, you've said it already in this time we've had together today, but history is probably one of the strongest claims to occupy a space in the city as any city has. Our cultural heritage and our history is some of the most significant parts of the city. So what this whole effort is just the simple recognition that economics is tied directly to the history in the city. What we need to figure out is a way to unlock that and again, using that term, monetize it. So how do we use the historical tourism-oriented assets towards the benefit of somebody that wants to run a business in the community or lease a building in the city. So it's creating more of a demand on the market side, and the supply side will naturally, being economics, will rise to the challenge.
So if you have a historical draw, right, and you have tourists coming to that draw, it works both ways because they'll come here. It's funny because it's like a catch-22, which you must see all the time. You have to have things for them besides the historical because they're going to have needs outside of just seeing history. So they're going to have basic human needs that will need to be met. But if you don't, and it's sort of striking that balance again. You know, you have to have some stores, but you can't. You have to have enough to get it started, but you can't have too many stores. If you don't have enough tourists, then you're going to have too many. Many
Well,
stores.
they'll fail.
That's right.
You need a balance of things, and
But you can't not have some restaurants. You can't not have places for them to go, right?
And then it needs to be coordinated, and it needs to be marketed. And so there's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work that needs to go into making an opportunity like this actually function correctly.
So what is the timeline on something like this?
Well, I think the fundamentals of the work has been mostly completed. We're going to have another short meeting this week or perhaps next, and I think that'll lead us to the final wrap-up of the conclusions and the documents, and then we're going to bring it to the public as a final draft to the leadership and to the leadership of the city and different organizations, and seek input. And then the body of the study is done, but then as we've seen in so many other opportunities, that's where the real work and the real commitment to work begins.
True. So the cities, you're not looking for any volunteers or donations at this time for this project?
Not yet,
Okay.
but we'll be announcing sort of the coming out party when we have I think what we're going to try to do in maybe July, is one of the aspects we haven't talked about is the National Park Service is very interested in this. And so they want to conduct what they call a charrette. So they want to come and they want to explore with the public and with some professionals all the ideas and things that could happen. And then they'll come out with a final report from that effort. And that charrette with the National Park Service should help get some excitement and help, leverage the interest beyond just the city limits.
Because I heard Jason Vincent was telling me from Planometrics, he said this whole area is like a national park.
I'm sorry, they're telling me to wrap up.
Okay.
I know this goes fast, and it's very interesting to hear about the Uncas Leap project, and hopefully we can have Bob come back on.
And if anybody has any questions about this project, contact NCDC. Let's get the facts and the information.
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you for coming on again,
You're
Karen,
welcome.
and thank you for
Thank you,
celebrating Norwich. And just check out the city website, see what we all got to offer here in Norwich. We got a great town. Just celebrate it and go out and be a good community friend. Thank you.